our very able resource worker, Sandy McGrothy.
Thank you, Jose. I'll just share my screen there. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great stuff. So look, just a reminder of what a plenary is. And the aim of the plenary is to invite all our members to come together to hear our updates on our activities since the previous plenary, to hear about any open nominations and to approve our work plan. And also, look, the main thing is to give our groups an opportunity for them to give us input into what issues are happening in their communities that could feed into council committees through our reps. So look, a brief overview of what we're going to be covering in the next 2 hours after my updates, and we'll have the vote on the work plan, and we're going to do a training needs poll as well. We have a member of our secretariat, Jude Gilbert, who's going to give a short update on what the Ukrainian Community Response Forum has kind of been doing. I also sit on that representing the PPN, so it's been a very active forum. So Jude is going to give an update on that. And then at 7:30, we have Tom O'Leary giving what I think would be a very interesting presentation on sources of funding for community groups. And that will be followed by a Q&A. So then the second half of the evening really will be about hearing from you. So we'll be going into breakout rooms, and then we'll be feeding back to the main room. So look, we hope to end the plenary at 9 o'clock, but we're going to leave the room open for half an hour just to have any informal chat at the end if anyone wants to stay on for it. Look, so I suppose just to give you a brief idea of the national perspective. So this is the most recent annual report that came from the department. And I guess it just shows how when you add all the PPN, the 31 PPNs up together across the country, you know, what impact it's having really collectively. So as of the end of 2020 anyway, there was nearly 18,000 groups, which was made up of over 600 environmental groups, nearly 3,000 social inclusion groups, and nearly 14,000 community and voluntary groups. And there were 941 PPN representatives sitting on over 400 boards and committees, bringing the voice of the community at a local government level. So look, in terms of our work plan, I'll be bringing this up again later on when we're having our vote anyway, but since our plenary last October, which was our first plenary for a good few years, and for those who weren't at it, we had, you know, great attendance. We voted in all of our 22 governance policies, which are all viewable on our website. So that was a really big piece of work, and a lot of PPNs don't really have those governance policies done yet. So, you know, we have a really great kind of, a really great policies to kind of back us up really as we do our work. We also called for nominating and filling our 37 PPN seats that we have on our different committees. So after the plenary, we had a really great response. Loads of nominations came through, and we managed to fill 33 of the 37 seats. So we held online elections for most of those. And then by the end of the year, they were kind of ratified in by full council. Those new representatives, many of which are here tonight, they started in January. We had an induction for them, and they've started to attend their meetings. And at the same time, we set up linkage groups, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And that's really there to kind of wrap around our reps, give them the mandate from our groups, and to link our members with our new representatives. So last month then we opened the call up again for nominations to fill the few vacancies that still exist, and that's still open, and I'll go through them in a second. And then obviously in May now we're having our second plenary. So look, what we plan to do between now and the next plenary in October, look, the main focus that we really want to have is in person, and get back to the face-to-face. Get back to face-to-face training and meetings and events. Our secretariat, which was formed in 2019, they haven't even officially met in person yet, so neither have our new reps or our linkage group members. So we're hoping if in June we'll have an event to bring them all together, and then over the summer we're going to hopefully start the Vision for Community Wellbeing piece of work, which is quite a large undertaking. And we also hope to develop a funding handbook and calendar for community groups. And then in September, we're going to have kind of dedicated events for each of our linkage groups, looking at kind of more specific themes and policies that are arising through the committees. And then finally, when we're having our next plenary, we're going to hope to have it at a more local level and have one plenary in person in each of our LCDC areas, so in West, North and South Cork. And look, the whole time we've been delivering and offering online training around all sorts of things like social media, Zoom, GDPR, and you may have seen we sent around a new training needs assessment, which I'll talk about in a second. So as well as that, we've been publishing our weekly newsletter, thanks to Patrick, and we've published 41 to date. And as Jose said, since we've kind of got up and running last year, we've had 153 new groups join us. So just looking at our budget, so in a normal year, our budget would be €30,000, and that really would be made up, would be covered paying for the expenses of our secretariat to attend meetings and our training. But luckily this year we were able to successfully apply for a carryover of unspent money from the last year and the year before. So actually we've kind of a bumper year this year, so probably won't ever happen again, but we have an extra 55,000, which totals 85,000. And you can see the pie chart kind of goes through based on our work plan and how we plan to spend the money. Again, a lot of it is contingent on being able to get back to the face-to-face events and meetings. But yeah, so like over 50% of the budget will hopefully be spent on those meetings and events when we can get them back up and running. And then we've ring-fenced about 15 grand to carry out our vision for wellbeing, which is definitely an overestimation, but we've just done that just to have. I think it's an important piece of work because it really gets us out on the ground to meet our groups at a very local level, and it creates, kind of policy papers then for us and our representatives to use to bring into the committees that they're in. Next to that is quite a large training budget. And then we have a budget for communications and merchandise. Most of that has already been spent replenishing our merchandise, which was empty kind of when myself and Patrick started. So they'll all again be given out at future events. And then we've kind of created a new fund for each of our linkage groups. So we're going to offer them, just as a start, €1,000 each to cover any of their members attending related conferences. So as a start, we actually have 2 linkage group members from the Environment, Climate Action and Biodiversity linkage group that are going to be attending the National Biodiversity Conference. So look, it's really important that we build the capacity of our linkage group members and of our representatives. And things like the National Biodiversity Conference and the plan that will come out of that are just so linked to the local biodiversity plans that will be developed by Cork County Council. And then finally, we have just a small budget to cover our annual hosting and subscriptions and our online elections. And then looking at our linkage groups, really, like, these are just the most important, I think, layer of the PPN, and they help us to link our members with our representatives. So as you probably all are aware, we have 5 linkage groups set up. And they're open to members all the time, and we have a slow trickle of new members coming into them. They meet at least quarterly, sometimes more. They're really run by the representatives, and they work on a rotating chair basis. So every 6 months a new chair, every 6 months a new representative will become chair. So that just again reinforces our flat structure. So you can see each linkage group plugs into a council committee, at least one. And this again, some of them are quite a natural grouping. So for example, the housing, planning and transport, they're kind of a natural organic kind of grouping, and they plug into those 3 different SPCs. So look, if anybody hasn't joined us yet, I'd encourage you to get involved. And if you didn't want to join, you can still bring issues or policy suggestions up, through the linkage groups. So that kind of level of operation, is finally up and running, and it's working very well so far. And just in terms of our vacancies that are open at the moment, so we have 2 SPC vacancies, one in the housing SPC and one in the social inclusion, rural and community development SPC. They meet quarterly. They're policy committees, so they're basically how Cork County Council will develop new policies that are then kind of proposed to the corporate policy group, which is made up of the chair of each of the SPCs, and then ultimately voted on by full council. So look, it is a political system, but the SPCs are a way that community members and the PPN can actually, bring their expertise and their voice into when those policies are being formulated. So those 2 vacancies are in the Community and Voluntary College. So if you did want to go run for them, you would have to be a member of a group that is registered with the PPN under the Community and Voluntary College. So if you aren't aware, all of our groups fall into one of 3 colleges: your Community and Voluntary, your Environment, or your Social Inclusion. And look, if you're not sure, give us a ring and we can go through it with you. So look, you can nominate yourself through an online form, and the deadline is the 20th of May. So similarly, we have 2 vacancies in the Community and Voluntary College in the Joint Policing Committee. Again, that's a really interesting committee that people really enjoy being involved in, and it looks at any local policing issues that people are experiencing. And you have kind of very high level Gardaí. You've got the Chief Executive of Cork County Council sitting on it. You've got a lot of very kind of high level people. So I'd love to see more women sitting on it, because there's only 5 women at the moment out of 26. So if any female members were interested, it would be great to have you on board there. And finally, we have 6 vacancies on our secretariat. So our secretariat is really kind of like the steering group that, makes sure that the PPN is operating according to the handbook. We meet once a month, and actually Cork County PPN has 22 secretariat members, which is like the biggest secretariat in the country by a long mile. Cork City PPN, I think they just have 8 secretariat members, but because we're so spread out, we have 2 secretariat members per municipal district, and then 2 per college. So look, at the moment, we have 1 vacancy in the East Cork Municipal District, 2 in the Carrigaline MD, 1 in the Macroom MD, and then 1 in the Community and Voluntary College, and 1 in the Environment College. So moving on to training. Some of you may well have answered our training needs survey, which we sent around last week. And of the almost 80 responses, there's an overwhelming need for new options for funding for training around that, which is actually brilliant, because we have a 4-week training series starting next Monday that Tom O'Leary, who will be speaking later, will be delivering, and it was specifically created for our members to really build the capacity of community groups to access new funding and existing kind of funding and grants and new fundraising options. So we have already that in place, but we'll try our best to provide training around all of these areas, because you can see there's an interest in nearly every one of them. And the last 3 in the bottom are ones that were suggested by those respondees. So we again will try and meet those needs. And we also asked the question, would people prefer training in person or online? And over 50% still want to go ahead online, but there is a real also a need for more local in-person training. So look, again, we'll try to cater for that. So just while we're on the training question, we want to run that poll again right now with everyone that's attending here. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Claire is going to just run a poll. So you might just take a few minutes to answer that.
Great, Sandy. I'm just going to turn that on now. So you should see a poll in front of you. There are 2 questions. The first one is multi-choice, and the second one then is just one choice. Okay, so you should see that in front of you. Can I just check that you can see that and that you've ticked your options?
Yes, we can. Well, I can anyway.
Great. So if you'd just like to, great, that's it. I can start seeing it working now. Thanks.
For some reason, mine is not allowing me to respond. Why would that be? Oh, there's a second part.
Okay, just make sure and scroll down and see the second question underneath. The first question is your choice of training, and your second question is online, offline, etc.
In the choices of training, you didn't include the 3 last ones that were on the previous screen that individuals had suggested.
Yeah, that's right. They were just suggestions in the other. So I should have mentioned, if anyone has an idea for training that isn't in this list, you can put it in the chat and we'll make a note of it along with those other 3. So if you are interested in one of the 3 that was listed, which is unconscious bias training, training about how to be more effective as a group, and training around the climate action adaptation plan, the new local economic and community development plan, the LECP, and the county development plan. And basically, I think it's around how do we get involved in public consultations, and how do we best, I suppose, make submissions to all of those upcoming policies. Well, not all of them are upcoming, but some of them are.
Okay, Sandy, I think pretty much everybody has chosen, but I'll leave it open for another 30 seconds if you want.
No, I think that's good. And I can see Anna there has suggested training around inclusivity and groups working with trans non-binary people. Yeah, we'll make a note of all of those. So yeah, any ideas you have around any other training, we're happy to facilitate. Yeah, so we can finish that up there. Will I share my screen again there?
Okay, we're ending that now.
Oh, we'll see the results. Sorry, you'll have the results there, please.
The responses.
Do you want to see the results?
Yeah, no.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay,
okay,
yeah.
so it feels a bit live. Okay, I think it kind of mirrors the original. Maybe less people are interested in risk assessment. I suppose it's probably understandable that those that are here tonight would maybe prefer the online, 66% of you, but there's still a desire for more local in-person training. Great. So look, we can record those results, can't we, Claire?
Yeah, we have a record of them, so I'm going to stop that sharing now. Thanks.
Okay, great. I'll just go back. I just have, I think, one more thing to do. And just so, I just wanted to mention, usually I'd kind of go through the background of the PPN and what it's all about, but we were kind of tight for time, and we have a lovely new animation that we're going to play soon that kind of really goes through all of that anyway. So, and now I just want to skip on. Okay, so yeah, so really the last thing that I need for us to do is to have a vote on our work plan. So really the section on the right hand side between now and October. So we're going to have a hands up vote. So basically, I know there's some associate members here tonight, so we obviously don't get a vote. So please refrain from putting your hand up. And it's only one vote per group. So if there's more than one member here attending, then you might, whoever is maybe more involved can cast the vote. But if 2 of you vote, that's okay, because we've asked you all to name your group anyway. So we're basically we're recording this and we'll take screenshots and we'll verify it later. But right now we'll just ask you simple hands up if you agree to approve the work plan going forward. Now you can use.
Sorry, Sandy, would you mind taking down what you're
sharing?
sharing?
I'm going to stop sharing. I just want to leave it up for a second so people could have another look at it. Yeah, so basically, guys, if you can go into the reactions on the bottom of the screen, and put the hand up, the raise hand, and that can be you voting yes. If you can't find that, you know, put your camera on and you can just physically put your hand up as well. And look, if you can't do either of them, you can just pop it in the chat saying yes. And if you can't do that, you can just put your mic on and say yes. So we're going to go into gallery view now, and just give us about a minute or two. We're going to do a count of this vote.
So just to remind everybody, please cast your vote. All those in favor of the work plan as proposed, just put your hand through your icon.
So just to say,
Okay.
Rob from West Cork Community, he is not saying no, he's just an associate member. So similar, Breda is just here to support us. So I'm just looking through to see, is there anyone from a group that is not saying yes? Tom, I don't see a hand up from you. Is that?
Yes.
That's a yes. Okay, a yes from Tom Howard.
Thank you.
Tom.
Yes.
Thank you, Tom. And I can see Sean Kelly has his hand up. Mihal, is your hand down? Mihal's hand is down. That's okay. Connor's up. Okay, so if everyone's happy, there's a vast majority voting yes to the work plan.
I'd like to see the work plan again.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, no problem. So if you can see there, it's just for the next 6 months really, or bringing us up to the end of the year. So really it's getting our community wellbeing vision work done, which is something that's kind of mandatory for all PPNs to do. I think over half of PPNs have done theirs and some are actually revising theirs. So we're kind of a little bit behind in that. So as well as that, we'll be really just having in-person events focused around our linkage groups, our linkage group members. And we'll be continuing our offering member training and dedicated training for our new reps as well. And again, having our plenaries in person in October. So I can scroll back to maybe the budget as well, because that kind of sometimes is a bit easier to see, you know, this is basically, you know, how the work plan will be funded. And I suppose the reason why there's so much money, I suppose, going towards meetings and events is because, you know, our secretariat members are spread out so far across the county, and that covering expenses for them, you know, is when they're coming to the in-person meetings, you know, is a bit of a big chunk of money, and then just running the events. So will I stop sharing now, or
Thank you.
are there any questions in the chat that I maybe need to respond to? I can't see the chat right now. Jose, are there any questions that people have, that people who maybe haven't voted yes, that maybe we can kind of go through, if anyone has any suggestions or questions? No.
Yeah, through the chair, Sandy, this is Donald Cassan, Atlantic View.
Oh, hi Donald, how are you?
Good, good. I just put up one question in the chat. Is it possible to have a more streamlined way for the linkage groups to engage with other members? You know, the current system, we frankly never got it to work. So look, the member of our association, who's our IT wizard, isn't available tonight, but they said it was very clunky. I don't know. Has anyone else had that experience?
I'd say he's referring to the chatter. So look, at the last plenary, when we set up, when we set up the linkage groups, we thought that we would trial using chatter, which is like a kind of a secure Facebook group for each of our linkage groups, and really it hasn't worked. People just haven't really engaged in it. So really the linkage groups are operating through meetings, through online meetings. And I don't think there's an issue really if people want to attend them. It's a matter of just being able to use Zoom, Donal. So that's the main way.
Yeah, and I've only ever been on one of the, I think it was the setup of the linkage groups, and I don't think I was on any after that because I did that chatterbox thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can safely say Chatterbox just isn't really
Just didn't
popular with
work, like,
people. Yeah, it was great in theory, I think, but just there was very little
Wasn't working.
discussion. Yeah, it wasn't working. So really, you know, the chairs of the linkage groups organise at least a meeting every quarter for all linkage group members, and that seems to be the way at the moment how the linkage groups are operating.
Are those meetings notified on Chatter? Because if you're not on Chatter, you won't get notified.
No, those meetings are online, and the meeting details, agenda and links and minutes are all just circulated via email.
Okay. Through the chair, could I suggest we use WhatsApp? Would that be possible? Could we put that request today?
A WhatsApp group, yeah, Donald, that'd be ideal, actually.
Yeah, Sandy, we've used WhatsApp at the JPC on a number of occasions. And
Yeah, that's right. I guess it's up to the linkage group members, and as John said, his linkage group that he's currently chairing, they as a group decided that they would like to use WhatsApp, and they use WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely an option
Could I suggest that we stop the discussion at this point? It could be taken up with the actual linkage groups, and there are linkage group sessions that are happening here, and you will have an opportunity to raise specific points in connection with the linkage groups at those meetings. Gavin, I think you wanted to say something. Have you?
No, I'm trying to put my hand up because.
Yes, I see your hand. Oh, so you're voting in favour. Sorry, I understand. Have we finished with the vote, Sandy? Are we happy?
Yeah, I think we can say the majority have voted yes to the work plan, but we'll incorporate those suggestions as well. And as Jose said, the second half we'll be going into breakout rooms, and there'll be time for all of those ideas to come up. So there'll be plenty of opportunities.
Sorry, Michal here. Could I come in on a question regarding?
Well, actually, could I just say there is another question that is been put there by Connor regarding the delegates to the National Biodiversity Conference. Could I suggest that you make this to the linkage group, the environment linkage group, Connor?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, okay. Right, sorry, can we go back to the question that was being made there?
Can I come in, please, on the work plan? Michal here.
Yes, Michal, yeah.
Can I query the budget for meetings? 50% of the budget is spent on meetings. Could we get a breakdown on what that is? It seems exorbitant to me.
Yeah, 1 second there now. I just have that in my slides. So, yeah, the total for meetings is 44,000. These are all estimates, really. So to break that down, we have Secretariat monthly meetings for the year. These were estimated, I suppose, when we had to estimate that all the meetings were going to be held in person, just so we would have the budget there if they weren't. Now look, up to now those meetings haven't, so it's very likely we'll have an underspend based on these estimates. But at the start of the year, when we were projecting the expenditure, we set aside 20,000 to cover Secretariat monthly meeting expenses. Now this is mileage, and basically just mileage really for the 22 Secretariat members. And it's a rounding up, you know. It also covers room hire, subsistence and refreshments. And obviously the Secretariat meetings are mandatory. So what else? The 6 plenaries. So again, we had hoped that tonight's plenary was going to be held in person in each of the LCDCs. So we estimated 12,000 for 6 in-person regional plenaries. So that, you know, that we had to overestimate because, you know, lots and lots of members could show up. So that's why, you know, again, it's a large figure. And what else we have? So the event we were going to have for linkage groups, where we invite our new reps and linkage groups along to discuss policy themes. And there's 4,000 set aside for that. And what else? There's
The vision, the well-being vision.
that's
There's
separate to
involved.
meetings and events. Yeah.
Yeah, there's meetings involved there as well.
Yeah. So we were also going to have a kind of a summer social as well for all of our reps, our linkage group members, our secretariat members, and there's 4,000 set aside for that. So I would definitely say they're rounded up, and they're up based on if every one of them was to happen in person and if we had large numbers attending. So it is very likely that by the end of the year we definitely won't have spent anywhere near that, you know. So look, I'm happy to share the details of, you know, of all of that after the event. You know, we're all about transparency.
Yeah, just in response, and thank you for the detail of that. Perhaps, I know we're not a community development organisation, but at the same time, 50% spent on travel and secretariat and members seems exorbitant to me in any case, and I think maybe we could get more value from that money if it was spent elsewhere. Just a comment.
Yeah, I suppose our hands are tied in terms of giving out any funding. We're not legally allowed to, PPNs aren't allowed to actually give funding. So, you know, we do have an additional budget. In a normal year, we'd be really struggling actually to cover our costs, but because we have the carryover from the last 2 years, you know, I suppose we wanted to really try to have as much in-person seminars and conferences and events, really to re-engage our members and to kind of be able to sit around the table with each other, to network with each other, to kind of bring us all back from our COVID kind of hermitage. So that's kind of it. But you know, you know, I suppose it's all based on just kind of estimates, really, Michal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And Margaret.
Are there?
Thanks.
Yes. No. Are there any other questions on the work program? We're already taking a vote, so if anybody wants to vote that hasn't or change their vote, this is the opportunity before we have the final count.
I can just see there that Christine from Ballycotton asked about the municipal district PPNs. Yeah, that's really part of the wellbeing vision work, because those workshops are carried out at municipal district level. So that will be basically the start of municipal district PPNs. And I think Ruth and Doug and Jude have their hands up, and Connor, there's quite a lot of hands up.
Right. Shall we put our hands down for the vote, those that still have their hands up for voting?
Okay.
Put your hands down so we can tell who's actually voting as a question and who's voting because they're in favor of the work plan.
Oh, yes,
so anybody who is has their hands up because they're in favor of the work plan, put your hands down at this point and let the people that want to ask questions go ahead.
And Carol asked just around the mileage rates. Yeah, they're based on public sector mileage rates, Carol.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like
yes,
to
go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question. I'd like to ask it through to Sandy. Does she have contact with the other coordinators of the other similar PPN groups throughout the country? Because good ideas get copied. And I'm just wondering if other work plans elsewhere might have some little morsel of, let's say, a crock of gold or some idea that it would be worth following ourselves. And we might as well benefit from more than our group thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. We meet as a national staff group every 2 months, and people are happy ideas, to share.
Pick their brains.
Yeah, we have yet to have an in-person conference because of COVID, but people are very happy to share their work plans and any of their bits and bobs. So, you know, that's no problem.
I think we could take that on board for when we do a review of the work plan, to have a troll through other work plans of other PPNs. Now we have a question from Christine Ballycotton.
Yeah, I answered that there, Jose, about the MD.
Oh, okay.
PPNs,
can you put your hand down if you're no longer asking a question? Great. Okay, I think that's it on the work plan then. Thank you, everybody, and thanks everybody for the hard work on the work plan. And now we have to implement it, and I'm sure that that'll be exciting and rewarding. I'd like to move on to the next point now, I think, which is the presentation on the Ukrainian Community Response Forum by Jude Gilbert, who is the representative of Cumra Nailon. I probably got that wrong, sorry.
Yeah,
I did practice it, but
no worries.
I haven't quite got it. And she's also the PPN rep on the Arts, Culture and Language SPC, and a member of the Arts, Tourism, Heritage and Sports Linkage Group. So over to you, Jude, for your very important presentation on the work that's being done on the Ukraine Resource Forum.
Thanks very much, Jose. And it's not my favorite thing to speak in public, either online or in person, so you'll have to bear with me. So just to kind of say that the Cork County Council's Community Support Programme was established for COVID and as a response to COVID to provide support and delivery on the ground. It was re-established as part of the county's response to assist the people of Ukraine. So it's made up of a multi-agency approach, which brings together representatives of both statutory and voluntary agencies operating across Cork County, trying to ensure commitment and consistency in terms of service delivery, information dissemination, and a sharing of ideas and how we might move forward. So it's made up of like the HSC, Local Link, various development groups across the county. One of them is our own CCAD, West Cork Development Partnership, to name but a few, Social Protection, Garda, TUSLA, Old Persons Alliance, and a large section of Cork County Council. Oh my God, I look awful up close and personal. I just got excited myself. Sorry, that's nerves for you. So, just over the Red Cross have been kind of monitoring who's been coming into the country over the last little while, certainly within the county, and over the Easter break, there has been a complete dip in the number of people coming into the country. So there was 8 people in the airports and 7 people at the ferry ports. However, that number has risen over the last week to about 140. Not everybody coming into the country needs accommodation, but the Red Cross support them to get to emergency accommodation until such time as they're allotted more long-term accommodation. Of the 26 people who came into the country today, 14 were sent to Green Glens, I think, and they're the first lot of people who've been sent anywhere in Cork. More often than not, people are sent to City West when they arrive into the county. The Red Cross are present with the other agencies at airports and ports to support people coming in, either to provide support, food, and basic supplies and transport. There's members of the HSC there, there's members of the Department of Social Protection and the Department of Justice, all welcoming people and ensuring that they have the right information that they need before they travel on. It is expected by the end of May that there will be another 33,000 people coming into the country. Again, that's only an estimate, but with the ongoing war, no one really knows, but that's what the country, I suppose, is preparing for. The biggest challenge, I suppose, in the long term is medium and long-term accommodation. The Cork County Council, as part of their property activation unit with Cork, are examining derelict and vacant properties within the towns to see how usable they could be made going forward. There have been over 600 new pledges last week through the Red Cross, and the Red Cross are helping to assess those going forward and assign people to pledged accommodation. It's really hard to condense all this work and all this information down into a few minutes because it's a huge volume of work. It's everything from the immediate need is shelter, safety, and food, and that people have a few bob in their pocket, and that they're entitled to, that they receive their entitlements and any medical issues. Going forward, then people need a bit of time to get accustomed to the country and to settle in for a few weeks. Very often people are coming with absolutely nothing and are very traumatized by their experience, and the trauma is ongoing because they might arrive with a certain amount, but then as things happen at home, that causes more trauma. So that's another area of work as well that the response forum will have to sort of look at and provide supports going forward. There has been a number of the ETB is very much on board in terms of supporting English language classes across the county, and there have been several in Buttevant, Mallow, Clonakilty, Skibbereen, and Bandon and Kinsale, and they're looking at setting information up in Mill Street soon. The Department of Social Protection have had a lot of queries around employment because as people have settled in, Ukrainian people are really willing to work, and they want it not only just for the money that they receive, but they very much see it as a focus and an opportunity to connect and an opportunity to be useful. So the Department of Social Protection are engaging with people, and they're also engaging with employers to see about how and where there are vacancies within the county for people. So they have an employer engagement section, and they're encouraging people as well and agencies to direct people towards that, and Jobs Ireland Network website as well. UCC has set up a dedicated page for information about third level students and continuing their studies, and supports going forward as well for lecturers, and it's there and it's open to everybody to connect with, and it's in Ukrainian and Russian. There is a body of work as well around translation and interpretive services as well, and a lot of the documentation is now all available in both Ukrainian and Russian, and there are some interpretive services available if they're requested. It would be better to have a more professional approach to interpretation because some of it is specialist and some of the people might not have the language, although people are within their own communities are helping with that too, because some people come with quite a good command of the English language, whereas others do not. Local development groups through the CICAP program are being asked to help coordinate the effort when people are in their emergency centres and are moved to more long-term accommodation to ensure people are supported both physically, emotionally, and are engaged within the community as well. So it's an ongoing, evolving piece of work, and there's a lot to it. So if you have any questions, please, we do have our own information on the PPN's webpage, and there is a dedicated webpage as well on the Cork County Council site for anybody who requires any information. That's
Thank you very much. Thank you for that extremely full explanation that you've given of the difficult work that's going on with respect to this problem, which affects the entire community, but most of all the Ukrainian community that yes, finds itself in our hands, really. I've got a couple of hands up there. Angela from Bantry Historical Society. I don't know if your hand is up to ask a question, or maybe it was to vote on the work plan. Angela, did you want to ask a question?
If you want to ask a question, you'll have to unmute yourself.
No question at the moment.
Okay, I've got two others. I had Sandy next.
Sorry, that was a clap that I couldn't.
Sorry, I didn't see the angle of the hand. Fine, well, I second that entirely. Doug,
Thanks, Jose. Hi, Jude. Just a quick one there for
Hi,
you.
Jude.
Hi, Jude. I'm actually a member there of the Ukrainians County Cork Facebook page, and
Are you?
I was onto the admins of that. I think there are two ladies. They may be here for quite a number of years. They may have families and partners here. They're not here due to the unfortunate situation that's happened at all. But they're doing their best to help their own country, men and women. But I suggested to them that they should join the PPN because, you know, for information, all the rest of it. And
Great.
they told me that I said, look, you're obviously in the city and the county, so there are two separate PPNs. But anyway,
Yes.
they decided, or they told me they were going to join the Cork County PPN. So I presume they now are a member group on here, and they're not here tonight, obviously, because they don't seem to be in the list of participants. But Sandy might be able to confirm if they are a member group now. And maybe they could liaise with you, possibly. I wonder, would that be an idea?
Absolutely. Yeah,
There was,
absolutely.
as far as I know now, Patrick would probably be better. He does the new groups registering, but there was one new group from East Cork that had come from Ukraine, and I sent their details to the community forum actually, because we had suggested, and it was brought up at the forum, that there needed to be representation from Ukrainian refugees themselves. But I'm only aware of that one group now, Doug. I doubt it's the same. Patrick, has there been any? Do you know yourself?
No, there's only one group so far. Just one group so far that has joined.
Okay. Sorry, yeah, they said they were going to join, but maybe they haven't. I didn't check because I didn't have access to the information. But I can suggest that they liaise with Jude and join.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
no problem at all.
Any one of us
That'd be great.
will facilitate that, of course. Yeah.
Yes, it would be great to have the representation of actual members of the Ukrainian community.
Yeah.
Gavin, is that a hand up?
Jerry, is it?
Gavin, sorry.
Sorry.
Yes. Could I just pass on a comment to Judith, and thank you for your presentation, which was very comprehensive and very thorough. Thank you. Would like to suggest that on the housing situation is very much the kernel of the problem. I'm actually in a situation where we're trying personally to downsize, but I'm thinking of all those other people who are trying to downsize, which means reducing the size of their accommodation, which basically means probably having accommodation previously, if they manage to reduce, which is larger. And therefore, I think the council should concentrate or put out a call for those who want to downsize, which might make space available for these poor individuals coming here.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good point, Gavin.
Yeah, it is a good point. I mean, just to say that the Red Cross, if anybody does have accommodation or they're willing to share or have a spare room or something that they're willing to share, bear in mind it would be for at least 6 months to a year, but there is a pledging facility on the Red Cross. They also will take pledges, I meant to say it earlier, but for goods and services and time. So if you have time that you're willing to pledge as well, which is just as important because people need time, you know, as well as goods and services. So that's also available on the Red Cross website.
I suggest that the contact number for the Red Cross be circulated to members. I'm sure it has already, but maybe following this discussion, particularly on the accommodation side, either through the chat or through the next newsletter. Jerry?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wondered, would the details of the group in East Cork, if that could possibly be sent out? It's just that I'm thinking that there might be one or two people that I know that might be interested, that are Ukrainian, that might be interested in that. You know?
In connecting with a development group, is that it?
Well, I understand. No, I'm told that I understood that there was a group of some description formed by Ukrainian people in East Cork.
I'll find out about that then. Yeah, absolutely.
If it just could be circulated in some way. Thank you very much.
No problem.
That'd be great. That's a great idea. Just a point on housing. We're a housing association and a housing body. We had a letter recently from the Department of Housing, which basically said we authorize tenants of social housing, if they have space, to take in Ukrainian refugees in any spare rooms that they might have. Now, I don't know what the actual details of this arrangement are. It's obviously quite an interesting idea. I assume it's not limited to housing associations, approved housing bodies, but it's also extensive to the local authority itself. And so it's worth investigating whether this idea of spare rooms in social housing, council houses and housing association properties can be actioned, and what the mechanisms are for doing so. Right. If there's no further questions on this whole issue, we will continue to cover it both at meetings and through the newsletter. But we thank you, Jude, for your presentation, and everybody for the questions. We now move to the next point. Yes. Is somebody saying something?
I just wanted to say, I would say that I would have concerns about the local authority asking for that to be done, to share. It has to be a choice for people, I think, to say that, yes, I have a space in my house. There are also other issues around, you know, child protection training, safety, Garda vetting. So there would be a whole process around that as well that would need to be considered. But I definitely think it needs to be a choice, because
Jude, you seem to have frozen.
although everybody, my phone keeps ringing. Can you hear me? Not everybody wants to give up a room in their house, and it's not for everybody. Some people like to give services and time, so I think it needs to be a choice. I don't think it would be fair to ask people to have to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Would the way to do it be to contact the Red Cross and see if what you have is appropriate?
Yes, you can pledge through the Red Cross, and that's the best. And what I can do is I will try and put the link in the message, the chat there.
That's great.
That's okay. Sorry, my internet is.
That's fine, and thank you very much, Jude, for all the information. Our next point is some more information on the PPN given through an interesting animation, I think, which is coming up now.
Community and voluntary groups in Cork can make their voices heard by joining the Cork County Public Participation Network, PPN. Our democracy is made stronger when the public participate in the decisions that affect them. Real participation goes beyond voting to a situation where people and government work in partnership to co-create policy, solve problems, and work towards the well-being of all. There are public participation networks, PPNs, in every local authority in Ireland to facilitate participation and representation of communities at a local government level. Cork County PPN enables the community voice to be heard in Cork County Council. This voice helps to inform the Council of the views and needs of the communities they serve. PPNs are now the main way that local authorities connect with community groups active in their area. As a member of Cork County PPN, you will have a greater say in local government decisions that affect your community. The opportunity to nominate members to sit on a council committee on behalf of Cork County PPN. The ability to contribute to local policy on important topics such as housing, planning, social inclusion and the environment. Access to the latest information on funding, grants and public consultations coming through Cork County Council. Access to free training. The opportunity to network with and learn from other organisations in Cork who may be involved in similar types of projects. The opportunity to advertise your activities on our newsletter, website and social media. Who can join Cork County PPN? Voluntary groups working in Cork communities like sports clubs, cultural societies, Meals on Wheels or Tidy Towns. Local organisations formed to protect the environment. groups representing people who are socially excluded and whose voices are not heard in our society, such as people with disabilities, migrants or travellers. Joining is free. Find out more on corkcountyppn.ie. Cork County PPN, giving communities a voice.
Thank you very much for that. I think that puts it in a nutshell why we're here, why this is important, and why you should join, or you should get other organizations that you know to join, because this is a way to community-based democracy. I'd now like to introduce our next presenter, which ties in very much to the training assessment that we had a few minutes ago. It's Tom O'Leary, who is a partner in O'Leary & Associates Training Consultancy and has over 20 years experience working to innovate, create, build and sustain small businesses and social enterprises. So Tom will tell us about the funding opportunities that are available to members of the PPN. So over to you, Tom, and very much thanks for presenting this tonight to us.
That's great. Thank you, Jose. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. Glad to be here this evening with you all to present just give you a short presentation on sources of funding for not-for-profit groups. As Jose said, my name is Tom O'Leary. I have a company, O'Leary & Associates Training Consultancy, based here in Kerry. Worked for 20 years as development officer, consultant, mentor and trainer, primarily working with social enterprises and not-for-profit organizations in areas such as planning, strategic planning, business planning and developing projects. And primarily my role with a lot of groups is working on sourcing funding, doing grant applications and feasibility analysis for large-scale capital projects. So I've basically taken just a few slides this evening to go through the main source of funding that we would work with our clients on. Just give an idea in terms of what funding is out there and what's kind of happening in the sector at the moment in terms of the funding landscape. I have a half an hour for the presentation, so there'll be about 20-25 minutes of a discussion around the source of funding, and then maybe 5 or so minutes afterwards for any questions you may have at the end. So just I suppose really there's a lot of discussion, and always has been a lot of discussion around how do we sustain community and voluntary organizations, how do we sustain community projects in our communities. And funding has always been an issue, and having enough money has always been an issue for a lot of organizations to sustain their projects, because after all, they're not-for-profit organizations. Primarily your focus is on commercial activity and making money. It's about running your services and operations as most cost effectively as possible. But what we always focus on before we look at funding sources, we look at your financial plan in terms of what you need money for, what's your budget, what's your requirements, what you need money for, what you might get away with without getting money, using maybe in-kind support, voluntary labour, voluntary support in terms of in-kind services or whatever it might be. And then we look at what sort of funds you require to grow and develop your projects and organizations. So a lot of what we do with organizations is looking at their current costs and how they can be funded, and then looking at their future cost base in terms of investing in facilities or extending premises or adding on new services, how they can fund those at the outset and how they can fund them long term. I suppose a key thing for me I've been working with community voluntary organizations both as a self-employed person, as an employee for the last 25 years. And the key focus, because my background is working in the private sector with businesses, with private sector companies, commercial organizations and not-for-profit organizations, cash flow is really, really important. You need to have enough money coming in to cover the money going out. The issue with most community voluntary organizations is that they don't have regular fee income. So there's not like sales of services or products that money's coming in constantly. So they're always looking at fundraising or possible grant support or sponsorship as a way of bringing in money. But there has to be enough money coming in to cover the money that's going out. So it's really important that you look at your budgets every year as to see where there's key times of the year that you need more money, and making sure there's enough money in the account to cover those key times. The key thing I always say to organizations, even though you're not for profit, and you are not-for-profit organizations, you're also not-for-loss organizations. So your goal is to go out there and to generate enough money to keep the show on the road, to keep the budget balanced, making sure that you don't run into overdrafts, make sure there's enough money there to cover the ongoing costs. So a lot of organizations kind of focus on, well, we can't generate profits because we're not for profit. Yes, you can generate profits. You can make reserves. You can generate reserves, but you will need reserves to cover those times when money's not coming in. So a lot of organizations struggled over the last 2 years because their fundraising was gone because they couldn't go out and fundraise and do physical fundraising, like backpacking or church gate collections or anything like that. So their funding dropped considerably. Some organizations had reserves they could rely on to keep things going. Other organizations didn't, and they're kind of struggling now. So when we talk about funding sources, the key thing to have the back of your mind is we need to have enough money coming in at all times, but we need to understand what that money is that we need. So it's about planning really more than anything else. So what funding is needed for? Operational costs, so ongoing funding requirements to keep the lights and heat on, to keep the insurance paid, to keep maybe staff in place, to cover all the ongoing costs that you would have. And they're annual costs that are there, they're not projected costs, they're real costs that you would have. Some organizations have loans, they might be paying back debt. Again, that's real money that's going out every month that has to be found. We always recommend that every organization has a reserve policy, so they aim to have, if they require 50,000 euros a year to run their organization, we'd be focusing on their target of being maybe 60 to 70,000 euros a year, so that reserve left over every year that they can build up, that they can use then to develop the services further. You might have projects in mind, so you might have done a needs analysis, and you might want to run it and start a new project in your community. So you might look for feasibility funding to do that. So we do a lot of work with organizations who are looking to convert old buildings into community facilities. They would get grants to do feasibility studies on those buildings, get an architects, engineers, look at the costs of the works to be done, and then that will allow them then to go off and apply for funding for that project. So there's project analysis funding there. And a lot of groups that we work with are involved in project development. So some small projects, like maybe local, tight towns groups developing capital projects like seating schemes or planting schemes in a village or in a town, up to groups who are seeking 7 or 8 million euros a year, 7 or 8 million euros to build, 30,000 square feet of enterprise space or co-working space or remote working space, to GA clubs or soccer clubs. They're looking for developing their facilities. So we can range from 1,000 euro projects to multi-million euro projects that groups are out there trying to raise money to develop these projects. And all these projects are to provide services and facilities for the communities they represent. So the source of funding then, so you're all working in the community voluntary sector, so you know that one of the hardest things that's involved when you're volunteering with an organization at whatever level it is it's constantly looking at how do we get money in the door, and it's all about a cocktail of funding. So it's not just one source of funds, it's a myriad of funding supports that are out there. So the first thing we look at is, can you generate any money from your organization? Can you charge for services? Can you charge for products? Do you have facilities that you can rent out? Do you have a membership structure you can charge fees for? Look at any way you can bring money in through fee income to your organization. Now, a lot of organizations can't, or they don't have any option in relation to fees, but some organizations can look at bringing in some fees that can charge for various services. You have one-off grants, which would be kind of pilot grants, maybe one-off grants each year that might come up. Some organizations would have core funding, so that'd be like something like, say, Section 39, Section 38 HSE funding that a lot of disability organizations would have. You've got core funding for things like, say, family resource centres, childcare groups, and they would be funded annually based on an annual work plan. Fundraising, which we're all very familiar with, whether being involved in it or giving money to different fundraisers. Online fundraising, which really took off during COVID. We've been basically pushing people to go online for years in terms of fundraising, and COVID kind of forced people online to look at their online fundraising capacity and to raise money online. And it's an area that we're concentrating on a lot with organizations at the moment, because it does allow you access to an awful lot more people if you're doing an online fundraiser as opposed to a local fundraiser. Sponsors, again, very, very untapped in Ireland. It's a big part of funding of the not-for-profit sector internationally, but it's not been a very big thing in Ireland historically. It's getting better. A lot of organizations and companies have, their corporate social responsibility departments now looking at getting involved in community projects. You've also got partners then, and partners will be, we split partners or different sponsors. So sponsor might sponsor one-off event or one thing, maybe kind of just a random type thing that you're asking to get involved with. Whereas a partner is an organization or corporate that's going to get involved in long term, maybe on a 3-year partnership deal with the organization that's going to fund a specific aspect of the projects. You've got donors, so people donating money, philanthropy. You've got finance then as well. So you have the option of debt finance, social loans through Cancredo, Community Finance Ireland, obviously commercial loans through the banks or the credit union. And then you have, which is, again is an area we focus on and we put a value on it, where you've got in-kind contributions. So volunteers, people volunteering their time, put a value on it. Okay, maybe put a value of even minimum wage on the amount of hours on each hour that a volunteer works for your organization, calculate the number of hours, multiply by the minimum wage, and that's a value. And you can actually use that and say, look, we're already spending X amount of money each year here on volunteers. This is the value of the work we're getting from our volunteers. You might get materials sponsored, equipment is sponsored. You know, again, we do a lot of work with groups where they will maybe use a local architect or engineer who is donating their time and will provide a service for free. Web designers will provide service for free. Graphic designers, you know, marketing consultants, financial consultants will all offer their time for free and get involved in local projects at local level if they're asked to. So the first thing, I suppose, really in terms of the traded income, again, we would, if you don't have any option in terms of charging fees for services or facilities, look at membership fees. Ask your members to pay, you know, nominal fee each year. It brings in just, you know, a small bit of money, but it brings in some level of funds. Obviously, if you've got a premises, you can look at renting space. You know, childcare groups with childcare fees, daycare fees for people offering daycare services, Meals on Wheels organisations offering or providing meals at a reduced fee, but they're still getting money in for that. And then you've got organisations providing different services within the community that you're charging for. The important thing if you can bring in some sort of membership or some sort of fee structure into your organisation, it's important because every grant application that you'll be applying for, a certain percentage of the matching funds has to be in cash. And they want to see that the organisation is capable of raising money outside of fundraising, because fundraising is very volatile and it can go up and it could go down. You could have a good year and a bad year. So if you're looking to sustain your projects, you need to show that there's regular money coming in regularly. And the only way you can show that is by showing that there's fees coming in every month for membership or for various different services. The fees have to be affordable. Like, you're not out there trying to make a killing here and make loads of money. So your service you're providing should be affordable to your community. However, you can have varying pricing structures. So, for example, we would work with a lot of sports organizations who make their facilities free. They give their facilities for free to maybe the local national school and maybe to other disability organization or maybe other clubs within the community. But then they'll charge commercial rates to a group of lads who are on play five-a-side or to a club that can afford to pay for rent of the facilities. They'll be charged, you know, full rates per hour, and they subsidize in the groups that are getting that space for free. So you can have different pricing structures for your projects. We worked with an organization who provided daycare and had a restaurant where they were delivering Meals on Wheels out of the restaurant, and there was a kitchen. But the public could also go in there and have a meal. So they created this community cafe where the regular people coming in off the street were paying, you know, standard price for their lunch or for their dinner, and that was subsidising the affordable meals in that they were providing for older people in the community and for people who couldn't afford to go out and have a meal each day. So one sector of the community were subsidising the other sector, but it was done very subtly. Again, if you're providing space in your organization, so if you've got a community centre or community hall or an arts centre or a theatre, again, make sure that you look at your space and that you maximise the rental income from that space. So if you've got a foyer, for example, in a community theatre that's not being rented for anything, that can be used as a gallery space. It can be used for events, it can be used for seminars, it can be used for talks, it can be used for workshops, it can be used for, for groups that can be rented to. So every part of the building you can look at and see, can that be rented and make money out of it. Fundraising then. So there's numerous methods of fundraising, and some are getting more and more creative. Some are getting very quirky, some are getting, kind of crazy stuff that's going on. But the reason why they're getting kind of more crazy and more creative is that they get more attention. And they there's so much fundraising going on, you have to kind of step up and, get noticed if you're out there trying to raise money. So they are doing a lot of kind of clever stuff now. The main thing with fundraising, and again, it's my kind of mantra here, is look at the return that's involved. So we would always recommend that you do larger fundraising events rather than kind of multiple smaller events. So if you add up all the time that goes into doing smaller, events throughout the year, the same amount of time or less time goes into large fundraising event once a year, but you make more money out of the one-off event. So that might be an annual golf classic, an annual social dinner dance, an annual race night, could be an annual community barbecue, an annual festival. But they're large events. They get the whole community involved. They're one-off, so people know they're coming up every year, and they can kind of aim for it. It kind of becomes a social thing, and they normally generate a lot more money than the smaller events when you add up all the smaller events. Now, some groups do smaller events purely because of a promotional thing to get noticed and to get their name out there and kind of as a marketing tool, and they also raise some money. But if you're looking to raise large money, you need to look into larger events that brings in 25,000 to 30,000 euros kind of profit. And there is companies out there that will support you on this and obviously charge a fee for it, and they run these events for you. And again, there's some good examples across the country of these events. Again, look at ongoing funding through online donations. So again, a lot of organizations now would have a donate now kind of page on their website. Again, we would be very much in favor of the online fundraising, because you're getting to a larger market, and it's a really good way of targeting the diaspora. So if you've got people in your community that moved away, they're in Australia, the UK, the US, or wherever in the world, through social media, through digital marketing, you can contact them, you can message them, you can get them involved, even though they're thousands of miles away. So if you've got a church gate collection outside the local church, that's not much good. If I'm in Australia and I want to give something, I can't, because I'm not outside the church giving money. Whereas if it's online, I can go on to my Facebook page and I can donate, whatever amount I want to donate. But I can also tell my other people I know in my own network, whether it be on a WhatsApp group or whatever, that they should also get involved, and you start spreading it very, very quickly. So it's a very good way of getting money from outside of your community, as opposed to relying on the same people the whole time within your parish, or within your town, or within your village. You can set up a charity fundraiser through third-party websites like GoFundMe, which will work really, really well, and a lot of people are very familiar with them. However, I would always be in favor of having your own website and having your own online donation on your own website. For one major reason is that the person who's donating can actually see what the organization does. They can go into the website, look at video, look at maybe an annual report, look at the services being provided, look at the people that are involved. And it means they can get more information. So it's not more transparent, and you can kind of actually sell it more as well by having people go on your own site, because you can push it more to them. Whereas if it's through a third-party site, there's only a certain amount of information you can get about the project on there. Then we look at tax incentives. So if you're fundraising, always look at the tax reliefs that are available through revenue. So you can apply to be an approved body under the tax relief and donation scheme. So what that basically means is that if you get a PAYE worker to give you 250 euros, which is the minimum amount they can give you as a one-off payment, or maybe over 12 months as a direct debit, they will fill in a revenue form with their PPS details. That form is given to you as like a receipt, and then you submit that form to revenue, and then revenue will give you a refund on the tax they paid on that donation. So for example, if they're on the higher tax bracket, then the group will get an additional 174 euros on top of the 250 euros. So what a lot of organizations we work with will do is they'll say, okay, let's target 100 people in a community. Okay, so there might be 10 people on a committee. So we call it the Power of 10 fundraiser. So if you've got 10 people on a committee in your organization, each of those 10 people, find 10 people they know that will sign up to this direct debit. So it's a 20 odd euros per month direct debit for a year, which is 250 euros for the year. At the end of the year, the organization gets in 25,000 euros directly from the direct debit scheme with the 100 people, but they can then claim the tax back on that 25,000 euros from revenue. So there's a huge top up when they submit that return to revenue. So it's a really good way of bringing additional funding in. Now, it doesn't benefit the PAYE worker because they can't claim anything back, but they know that they're giving more than 250 to you when they're part of the scheme. So that's the kind of the selling point for them. If you're going out to a company to fundraise, they can't avail of the scheme, or you can't avail of the tax relief scheme with a company because they're not a PAYE worker. But the company, so in my case, if you came to me and said, look, Tom, we want you to sponsor us, 200 euros. If I give you 200 euros, that 200 euros to me is a marketing expense. So I can claim that as an expense when I do my tax return. So I can get relief on that expense because it's a marketing expense. So if I'm supporting my local soccer club and sponsoring their jerseys for the academy squad team, I can put that down as a donation, a sponsorship, which is sponsorship, and I can use that as against my taxes at the end of the year. So you're always looking at how we can sell this to the person we're going to when we're fundraising. Sponsorship, again, very underutilized form of fundraising. The key really with this is identify companies that are targeting customers that are using your services. So, for example, our under-9 soccer team were sponsored by the local indoor play centre, called the Palladium. So they sponsored because their target market was kids for birthday parties, for communions, for confirmations, or just for regular kind of day outs. So they sponsored the academy, and the academy in our club was 140 or 140 kids. So you had 140 kids running around with the Palladium on their jerseys. So it was a very, very smart kind of way of targeting their target market and the parents. So the parents thought fair play to them. They're sponsoring our kids and getting their kids play football. We'll in turn then support their business. Okay, so you go after those type of local businesses that want to get involved because they're local, and then companies that want to get involved because they'll get some return from it. Look at what activities get most coverage. So again, if you've got no presence on social media, or you're never in the papers, or you don't have much kind of a PR strategy or communication strategy, and people don't know anything about you, a company's not going to get involved there because they're not going to get any exposure. Whereas if you're on social media a lot, if you're in the papers a lot for good reasons, companies want to be part of that because they're getting more exposure, they're getting more value for their money in terms of their brand is more visible to more people. So the benefits of the company might be they're a local company, they want to get involved, or there's a marketing value there for the company. But you need to identify what the marketing value is, and that's where you sell to them. Okay, so you're selling the exposure you get by being involved in this project or in this group or this facility, wherever it might be. Identify key people. So always look for people that you know or that are connected with your group, that are working in organizations at a senior level, or they're connected to people in the senior level in organizations, and use them to get you in the door. There's no point cold calling these companies to get inundated with requests for sponsorship and for fundraising every year. You've got to find someone that's already in the company that can say, look, I'm involved in a local club. They're doing fantastic work. I think we should get involved and help them out. That's the way it works. What we did in our own club is we identified every parent that was in the club that had their own business. And we went to them directly and said, look, your kids are getting value out of this. You're a local business. Can you support us? And we raised substantial money there this year for a new project, by targeting people directly. But they were already connected with the club because their kids were playing with the club. Look at long-term partners. So I was responsible for a while for the commercial side of the Ring of Kerry charity cycle. And we got in multi-year partnership deals with like Lidl, SuperValu, Skoda, and it was on a 3-year deal. So we went to them and said, okay, rather than doing it year by year, can you sign up for a 3-year deal? At the end of 3 years, let's review the whole thing. If you're not happy with it, you're free to walk away. If you're happy with it and want to continue, absolutely brilliant. But it meant that we had them tied in for 3 years. So we knew we could budget then based on that for the 3-year period. Where if it's every year, you're kind of going back to the drawing board every year, you're going out trying to sell it to people every year, and you can't really budget for that because you don't know what's going to come in. Whereas the 3-year deals, you know what your budget is for that 3-year period. Debt finance, again, you try to avoid it if you possibly can. Unfortunately, with large capital projects, you're not going to get 100% finance from any grant. You're going to have some level of matching funds that normally will come through a loan from the bank. With grant aid, you have to pay for the project first. So you got to incur the expenditure first. So you need some sort of bridging finance from the bank. So you got to spend the money, borrow the money, spend it, get the drawdown of grant, pay off the loan that you borrowed to start the project. So there's going to be always some level of some level of debt finance required in every project. You can go to the commercial banks. So your Bank of Ireland's, the Ulster Banks, AIB, etc. Credit unions are not-for-profit organizations, are cooperatives, they're social enterprises, so they're already in the space. They are looking to get more involved in community projects and to finance community projects and give longer-term loans for capital projects as well. Your social banks, you've got Clan Credo, who are actually headquartered out of Middleton in Cork. Great organisation to work with. Community Finance Ireland as well, very good organisation. These are social banks, so their main focus is on lending money to not-for-profit organizations and charities. They have specific type of funds for certain projects like sports capital funding, supports for sports clubs, but they will support viable, and the word viable is really important because they are loans, they have to be repaid. And they will support those and support them, to millions of euros every year into community projects. The benefit, I suppose, over the social banks over commercial banks is that a social bank won't look for any guarantees from directors of companies. So if you're a director of your not-for-profit company, they won't look for guarantees from those directors, whereas a commercial bank will look for guarantees. So that is a huge positive with the social banks, whether it be Tancredo or Community Finance. If you are looking for loans from any of the banks, whether it be social banks or commercial banks, they will look for a business plan. They will look for at least 3-year projections. They will look for details of the management structure, who's involved, what's their capacity, what's their experience, what's your subcommittee structures, who's going to be responsible for the project, who's managing the project, and what experience you have in managing money and managing projects. They will look for your repayment capacity. So like any bank, they're not going to give you money unless they know you can repay it. So you need to show that you're capable of fundraising, you have some fee income coming in on a regular basis. They will look for security. So they will look for the property or the premises that you're developing as security against a loan, like any bank would. But again, a lot of people try to avoid it. If you can do, but it's going to come to some point where you're going to need some sort of level of finance from some banks. And again, we will be kind of pushing for the social banks there because again, they're just they're geared up for the work you do. Grant aid then, and this is like to be endless because there's so many different types of grants out there. So you got specific grant aid, which would be for like things like pilot projects, one-off things that are announced for new projects. Then you have specific grants that will be annual. They come up every year, but they're kind of for things like, say, maybe community support fund, your town and village renewal schemes, all these type of funds that come up every year, but they're one-off. So they're for one-off projects. They're not for ongoing costs in terms of covering employment costs or operational costs. They're one-off funding for one-off projects. You have annual grants, which are like HSE grants, community and financial support grants, your TUSLA grants to family resource centres, your childcare funding, your Section 38, Section 39 funding. They would be annual grants, so they would cover operational costs. Excuse me, things like salaries, operational costs throughout every year, based on work plans and based on a program of works that's been signed off on. The key thing with grant aid is research what grants are available for your project, know what the deadlines are, know what the criteria for the grant is, research the aims of the grant, look at what other groups have been awarded funding in the past. So it's really important that you understand what the grant is for, because a lot of people apply for grants that they're actually not eligible for, which doesn't really make sense, but that's because people don't look at the criteria and they just literally throw in application after application after application. That's a waste of time on both your side and the people that are assessing the applications. If you're looking for funding under a grant, you have to show that if you're looking to develop a project, that project or service that you want to develop has been identified through a consultation process and a needs analysis. Okay, so if you haven't done a consultation process, you haven't done a needs analysis, but you think it's a good idea to do a project, that's not going to get funded. You have to back it up with the rationale as to why you want to do this project and why this project should be funded over another project. You have to the documentation that's required ready on file. So that's all the paperwork that they would be looking for to be submitted with the application. That needs to be ready to go on a file so that when it's looked for, you have it available. I would always recommend people have a generic application completed, so kind of one we made earlier application, so you can cut and paste that then when you need to. So a lot of applications have the same generic information. Again, it's about having that ready, so when you're looking to apply, you've all that information ready to go. The key thing then is obviously complete the application form in time and have all the technical information and support documentation required and submit that with it if it's looked for. So a lot of people get turned on because they're not suitable, not eligible, or they just haven't proven that they need the project or that it's been backed up by any consultation. We use a simple, very, very simple wall chart or wall planner. We use with groups, and it's basically where groups can actually identify what grants are available, where the grants are coming from, who's contact person within the organization is given the grant, for what project would it go towards, the deadlines, what's required for the project, what we need to do to get the grants, who's going to be responsible for it, what are the deadlines. So it's really a way of planning your grant activity. A lot of organizations there would maximize the amount of grant aid that they get every year. And they're nearly professional in terms of how they go after funding, because they do this. They identify what's out there, when is the grant deadline due, and they assign someone in to go after it and to work on that project. So they'll go out there and they'll identify what funds are out there for specific elements of their projects they're working on. So, like for example, the Thai Towns organization might say, okay, we need to do a biodiversity plan. What grants out there for biodiversity projects? They might be looking to some capital works around maybe signage or seating or lighting or footpaths. They look at what funds are out for there. They might be doing a kind of a walkway, river walk or whatever, and they're getting what funds are out there for that project, and they'll go after it, and they'll do it kind of military style in terms of planning, so that's all ready to go when the deadline is there. Other groups then they kind of flap around the place looking for this, that, and the other, literally a day before the deadline. And then they wonder why they don't get granted. So it's all about being prepared when you're looking for grants. When we're working with organizations on grant aid, the source of funds that we look for is your PPN. Your PPN is a source of information in what's happening within the community voluntary sector, and they be aware of what funds are coming up in terms of funding opportunities. Funding Point is a subscription-based website. There's a database of all funds that are coming up. That's updated every single time a fund becomes available. It's updated, so there's no reason as to be you shouldn't be left in the dark in terms of what funds are available. ActiveLink.ie, another website that we use, which has information about grants and funds are available for the sector. And then what we do is we go on to every government department. We get on their email list. So every time they announce a new grant or a new program, it has to be publicized. It has to be emailed out. So it's normally emailed to their email list and contact list. We get notifications from the departments when funds are available. Okay, so it's really important that you get as much access to information as possible, so you're aware of what grants are available when they're available, and not find out like 3 weeks after the grant is closed that there was funding available for a project you could have got, but you missed the boat because you weren't aware of it. Some sample of grants, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but you got, again, RDF funding, which is the large scale capital funds, leader grants. They're in transition period at the moment. Hopefully a new program will be starting hopefully next year, and they'll be back to full funding again. Sports capital funding for sports organizations, community enhancement program, community support fund, town and village renewal schemes, outdoor recreational schemes. Rethink Ireland would have a number of different funding programs. Community Foundation of Ireland have a number of funding programs as well throughout the year that they would have for specific things. Philanthropy, again, you've got Ireland's Funds, JP McManus Foundation, Tormar Trust. These are all philanthropists and foundations that give money every year to projects. SEAI, Sustainable Energy Ireland, have grants for upgrading of buildings to make it more energy efficient. Put in, say, solar, heating solutions, insulation, LED lighting, etc. Different biodiversity fundings out there. So there's lots and lots of grants. That's only kind of a snapshot of the grants that might be out there. The key thing with grant aid is that you have to be organized, as I said. So typically they will look for either a strategic plan or a business plan, or if it's a large scale capital grant, they'll want it backed up by a feasibility study. So if we're doing, like, say, a project that's over €1 million in cost, so like a building project, that would need to be backed up by a fairly detailed feasibility analysis showing there's value for money and showing this being well thought out before it be funded. Other things like annual reports, annual accounts, your constitution, quotations, planning application details, all this technical information that you should have should be on file, ready to go when it's sought, because a lot of organizations miss deadlines because they can't find some of these details or they don't know who has them. So it's about being organized, really. And if you're organized and you're informed, you will maximize the amount of grants that are coming to you. And that's just guaranteed, because I've seen groups who are very, disorganized and were all over the place and not get anything, to changing the way they operated, being very, very, well organized and well planned when it came to looking at grants. And they would have increased their grant aid, by multiples of 100% over maybe a 2-year period, because they're just ready to go when the grants were being made available. And there was a lot of grant aid available over the last 24 months because of COVID, and there will be more grants coming online as well this year. Okay, so that's a quick overview, very, very quick snapshot of the sources of funding that's out there within the sector. We are going to be doing training with the PPN and a more detailed look at each of those elements in more detail, and we'll also be doing a bit more work around grants specifically in terms of how to apply for grants as well. But the key thing really in for all of you working within the sector It's not about being really focused on just one thing, like maybe fundraising or maybe grant aid. It's about looking at being focused on all the potential sources of funding, because you take all those sources, if you manage to bring in, a certain level of funding from each of those sources we talked about, you'll bring in, a substantial amount of money every year to your organization. And it does take an awful lot of work. It does take an awful lot of volunteer time. But the reality is, there's no magic pot of gold out there that is available year in, year out to keep everything going. And that's just the nature of the sector we're working in. It isn't very well financed. It is very reliant on volunteers to do amazing work. I would be certainly, be an advocate of targeting in-kind support from people who can provide you services that you don't need to pay for them, that saves you money. So it's not just about bringing more money in, it's also about saving money as well. So getting things donated to you, getting resources in that way that brings down your cost base, and so you're not actually chasing more money. So it's not all about the money side, it's also about bringing in the in-kind support as well. So I'll open the floor to any questions you might have. To see if there's anything on chat there in terms of questions. No. Has anyone any questions for me, or did it all make perfect sense?
I'll just get you to stop sharing there, Tom. And
Oh
come
yeah,
back in.
yeah,
Thanks.
sure. No.
Great. Do we have any questions for Tom? Please put your hands up in the normal manner. Excellent presentation, dealing with both the strategic aspects and with the possible sources of funding.
Thanks,
Any questions for Tom?
I think with most community groups anyway, that would be getting Section 39 and say like the one-off grants and stuff like that. It would make perfect sense, to be honest. So
okay,
I think that's why you're not getting many questions.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a question from Connor first, and then Gary.
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I enjoyed your presentation. I've had my nose to the wheel generating funds, I suppose, for the last 10 years. And I can recognize a lot of the things you said, and was particularly taken about, the online fundraising from the diaspora. I mean, that's something we've kind of overlooked. And I think the grants planning form is an excellent thing as well. I just put in the chat there that we have a newsletter. See, even the Ukraine flag in it to start, which we throughout COVID we had it sponsored. We would produce 1,000 every second month. It's for free. So we have a lot of advertising in it, which we charge for. And obviously, over the years, we've kind of built up, and it's good quality stuff and so on. And that saw us through COVID amazingly, because we got sponsorship for the printing, and then all the ads were the actual funding. Excellent. Just to mention that.
Great stuff, Conor. Well done. Fantastic.
That's great, Conor. Thank you. Jerry, you got a question?
Yes, essentially, you do see situations where an organization has had grants for 3 years or 4 years, and then suddenly they're not getting any for the granting. And I'm just wondering, what would be about, say, at a government level in an assessment that would produce that situation? I know it's nebulous circumstances that can arise, but I just wondered if it were possible to get an idea of why you then fail, having succeeded over a period of time.
Yeah, it's a good question, Jerry. I suppose we've been saying this for a long time, that when groups come to us looking to say, Tom, can you help us out with a grant application? We'll always ask the question, first of all, do you really need the grant? Is the first question we ask. And then we ask the question, after the grant is gone and the money is gone, how are you going to sustain the project? Okay, so the analogy I always use is that it's like a school being donated a school bus, okay, which is delighted because they're after getting a new bus, but they don't get donation of a driver, or don't get donation of tax and insurance, or don't get donation of diesel. So they can't use the bus because they can't sustain it because they don't have the money for it. So we always ask the question, you have to look at long-term sustainability. So there's been a lot of grant aid that would be what's considered pilot funding. and it allows projects to start and develop. And then maybe after you say, Jerry, 2 or 3 years time, that money then is taken away, and the kind of the scaffolding then is taken down, and the whole thing falls down because there's no more support there. So what we do with groups is we say, okay, look, let's look at 3 years on the line, and you need say €8,000 a year to run the organization in 3 years time, but that your main core grant is gone. What can you do over the next 3 years to replace that grant aid kind of incrementally over the next 3 years? So one of the things we always say, if we're bringing in, say, a program coordinator who's been hired on a pilot basis with a fund maybe for 2 years to pay their salary, and if we're interviewing that person, the first thing we say is that your main priority in your job is to find your salary in 2 years' time. That's your main priority, is to raise money, is to go out there and find other sources of funds, to do what you can do to replace this money we have now and to have more money coming in 2 years' time. A lot of organizations believe that in 3 years' time, the government will bail them out, that they only, the 3 year thing was only kind of, pie in the sky, that in 3 years' time, they'll come back with more money and they'll have to sustain us. That doesn't happen. Sometimes it happens, but most often not, it doesn't happen. So what happens is that normally at the end of the second or third year, there's panic then because people realize that our funding's coming to stop in 6 months' time. We have no reserves. We have no other income coming in, and they start panicking then and start looking for grants everywhere to kind of replace what they're going to lose. So it's really important that you look at long-term planning and you start factoring in, how do we replace the lost money now so that we have it? And if the grant is kept going, then it's bonus because you've got 2 sources of funding coming in that's keeping things going. So it's really important. But it's a good point because there's an awful lot of pilot projects that have started over the years that have fallen away because they weren't able to sustain them. And the problem with that is that you're providing a service maybe in the community to a group of people, whether maybe older people, youth, people with disabilities, whoever it is you're working with, they're now used to getting the support, and you're pulling the support away from them in 3 years' time because you've got no funding for it anymore. So it's always important to look at long-term how we can sustain it. Okay, and it's not just ticking a box saying, oh yeah, we can sustain it and we've answered that question. It's about really how you sustain it in a couple of years' time. When that money's gone, where is this new money going to come from that's going to replace it?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, right, thank you.
That's extremely useful. Thank you. I should just mention that this presentation that you've seen will be followed up by a 4-week course that Tom is actually running for the benefit of PPN members that registered to it. Sandy has entered a link on the chat. I think it's happening every Monday, the course that you're doing, Tom, and you'll be going into detail into all the areas that you've explained. So for those of you who have felt this is useful, as I have, this is a good opportunity to get more in-depth in the whole area of fundraising and funding strategy. Thank you, Tom. I'd like to thank you very, very much for the information that you presented tonight. Yep. Mute myself. Right. Thank you, everybody. That was a short session, but quite intense, certainly as far as our linkage group is concerned. And now we will have a report back from the chair of each one of the linkage groups. So for the first one, I will ask the Community Safety, Crime and Policing breakout group, John Fuller, to please report back briefly. John? Is John here? Sorry. Is John Fuller here to report back on the...
Jose, he was in our breakout room. He's just back there now, I see. John, are you able to give that report, or I can do it if you want? I can see he's there, but he's muted. You're muted there, John, just in case you're... Jose, maybe do you want to move on to another...
Okay, so we move on to the next one. That's Liam.
I'm back now. So, sorry.
Oh, here's John. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I introduced myself to the members present chair, but I was known to all the members present because we have been meeting over the last number of weeks. Now, I explained that the JPC committee has a legal standing. It was set out in according to section 36(1) of the Garda Síochána Act 2005. And then I explained the purpose of the JPC. Now, we differed, unfortunately, on what questions could be asked at those JPC meetings. I was a member of the JPC for the last number of years, and we got certain guidelines as regards questions that can be asked and what can be discussed. But I think our short meeting that we had a moment ago and over the last couple of weeks, we just differed slightly on the questions that we may raise. But other than that,
like what?
Okay.
Say that again now.
Like
Sorry?
what questions?
Well, we'll say
Sorry,
you know what I mean.
Tom, did you want to say something about this meeting specifically?
Yeah, what questions did they disagree on?
All right.
We disagreed on questions, shall we say, somebody that would have experienced a personal issue with members of the Guards. And some of us were of the opinion that we had to represent, shall we say, the community rather than individuals.
Oh, yes.
So that's how we just differed, Tom.
Right.
All right,
But,
thanks, John.
Yes,
but
that makes sense, John.
you know, I just explained also like the procedure at the JPC meetings that we get the agenda maybe a week in advance, but we will not get the Chief Superintendent's presentation until the day of the meeting, and then that's circulated on the day. The press would be present, so some of us were of the opinion that if the Chief's presentation was made available prior to the meeting, that perhaps the information contained in the Chief's presentation may be given to the press in advance, and they would have that would be sensitive information, and you know the issues could arise if that information became public prior to the meeting. So that was kind of the discussion, really, Chair, on with the linkage meeting for the policing, and well, thank you very much.
That's very good, John. Thank you. Liam, can we take the next one? The social inclusion, rural development.
Yeah. So there was five or six of us in the room. So we had I just explained what the SPCs that were attached and that, and we went on then to talk about issues facing the community. There was some talk around the lack of funding that people weren't able to raise funds over the last number of years, and therefore that, you know, people are low on funds because of that. The other item then that came up was the whole thing around the insurance and the difficulty of getting insurance and that kind of thing. So there was a suggestion made that maybe we should be trying to maybe see about, could it be possible to get a kind of a group scheme going for insurance or something like that, or maybe maybe we should
I'm on a meeting now, so I'll just talk away.
Right, maybe we should look at looking at to see would the government do something, maybe put us under public bodies insurance or something like that, or whatever. There's issues around Dursey Island and that as well, which we got a full update on what's happening down there. What policies we can develop, maybe community, maybe we should see if we could bring it forward that community councils shouldn't be subject to VAT, or maybe be able to reclaim VAT. There was a whole thing about the fact that, for instance, defibrillators that community groups are paying for them to be put up in places, and yet there's a huge VAT component in that, and that you know, maybe there should be somewhere around that that revenue might look more favorably on community groupings and that kind of thing. Anyway, look, I don't know where to go, but that's what was thrown out anyway. Okay.
That's great, Liam. Thank you.
Thanks.
Could we have now the report from Environment? Rafaela.
Yes, thanks, Joseph. So yeah, there were 5 people in our breakout room, and the people that were there, apart from 2 representatives, were new members, let's say. So we did a bit of presentation of ourselves. So what are we? Which are our groups? And it was interesting to see and to hear what the other groups are doing at the moment. So I explained a bit what is our work, let's say, and what is the linkage group, what usually the linkage group does. So they are happy to to join our linkage group. So we will have a bit more feedback and help in doing our suggestion and feedback, our suggestion to the county council. So I think that's the main thing, and the probably more important thing for all the linkage group, to have support, so that the representative can have help from them and from all their different experience and different point of view. So we didn't really arrive to answer the questions about which issues are in the community, but we will be in touch in the next few weeks. So we'll probably get back with other ideas and suggestions. And that's everything for me. Thank you.
That's great, Rafaela. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, could I ask Colm to report back on the Arts, Tourism, Heritage and Sports Breakaway Group? Colm, are you still there?
Oh, sorry about that. I forgot to unmute myself.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman Jose. You're doing a great job, in fairness to you. I think we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us here in our group, and first of all, Jude and Doug had sort of cleared up some confusion around identity of some of the Ukrainian groups, which was very positive. Yeah, we all agreed that with Tommy, when he was saying getting back on our feet after COVID is a bit of a job. Motivating volunteers at the moment is a difficulty, and I think everybody's facing that issue. Forming linkage groups, getting these functioning, there's a difficulty seen around this by all of us. Really, we need a lot of help. We need a lot of assistance. We need guidance. We need leadership. I suppose, particularly to do, we always speaking about mobilizing groups in the arts sector, and maybe dividing up, giving that specific targeted attention, and bearing in mind that you're dealing with, drama, music, art. You have a range of different disciplines there, and we just need to look closely at this, as we do in other aspects of our, we're covering art, tourism, heritage, culture, language and sport within our particular group, which is a wide remit. But we really need, I suppose, we're finding it hard to kickstart ourselves back into action. I think everybody seems to agree with that. And Doug certainly says that as well, volunteers. Volunteering is an issue. Jude made a rather interesting suggestion. How about putting an ad in our local papers, such as the Southern Star, to maybe invite linkage groups to rise to the occasion. And perhaps Mial suggested that maybe we have a meeting with Ian and Sandy with us to see what policies are being formulated, or if we can get policies formulated around linkage groups and getting motivation within this whole field, and kickstarting this, because we seem to be a little bit stalled. And we all agree that a WhatsApp page or facility would be very desirable as a way of communication, as a user-friendly platform, I think, because we're all relatively friendly with that, or relatively familiar with that on a day-to-day basis. So I think that sort of summarizes. Am I forgetting anything important there, Jude?
That's great, Colin. Thank you very much. Finally, I'd like to report back on the Housing, Planning and Transport Group. Again, we had 5 representatives at the meeting. I think overall there was a feeling of slight frustration, particularly at the issue of not having information with sufficient advance time to be able to read, absorb and discuss with other members of the linkage group. Really, we feel that we must resolve this issue, and the linkage group recommends that the Secretariat requests a meeting with the Director of Services and the officer responsible to actually deal with this issue. We've had feedback from different quarters. It's not clear and it's not satisfactory. And really, we need to make the point, we need the information in advance if we are to engage, and we want clarity on the timescales and procedures that are going to be followed. We don't want to have to continue sending letters, emails, and raising the issue. We would like a meeting to resolve the issue. So that was the first point. Having said that, we went through what had come out of the meetings, and we felt some productive discussions have taken place. I felt that productive discussions have taken place on the housing SPC. We've raised particularly issues around housing affordability, that is, that intermediate step between social housing and the market. We feel that the solutions are not affordable. Prices that are coming out for first-time buyers are too high, and there is an affordability gap for people who don't qualify for social housing but cannot actually purchase, even with the affordable grant scheme. There was a suggestion that the cost rental model, where approved housing bodies provide discounted rent housing for people on middle incomes, was a good option. This was raised at the meeting, but we feel the county plan does not give it sufficient weight, and it should give it more. There were other issues around housing on the islands, for example, and housing for travellers, which we feel are important issues. Likewise, in planning, the marine action plan, and so on, that seems just basically referred to at meetings, but there isn't any actual consultation or opportunity to engage. Our feeling was that we should have a list of key issues for each linkage group that we will raise, if necessary, again and again at SPC meetings, so that they're taken on board. But the onus is on us to identify what those key issues are for each one of the linkage groups, and to make sure they are raised and taken on board. At the moment, we're just reacting, and we need to be more proactive. We need to go beyond the stage of just passively listening and our comments being put aside and not acted on. This was really the feeling generally, and the idea of a WhatsApp group seems very sound to allow us to exchange prior to meetings. There is supposed to be a meeting of our linkage group, Housing, Planning and Transport, this Monday, the 9th at 7:30. So hopefully anybody who wants to be involved in that group can make that meeting. Please send your email to Sandy or Patrick in order to ensure that you're kept in the link. I think that really that's basically most of what we need to say on this linkage group. Now it's just falls to me, I think, to take any final comments, but also to basically thank you all for attending this meeting. I think what we're doing is a difficult and complex task. I think that we're dealing with it, continuing to deal with it. I think it's vitally important that community level democracy be introduced into county council governance, and that's what we're here for, and that's what we'll do. Bernie, you got a final comment there?
Yeah, and it came up, it was just where we were, when we were booted out of our room, we were talking about the, you know, accommodation for travellers and also for on the islands and that. And one thing I was thinking is to bring our issues to use better our issues, we need data around a lot of these things. So I think we need to gather data on those things. And just maybe, I just did have a question for Colin in terms of like maybe higher level policies. We've just seen that there's a living wage brought in for the arts community. You know, I wonder how that's going to impact and those kind of things, like how can we link, say, national policy into what's happening locally, and how can we promote better, you know, what's going on? Is that going to energize some of the art area, you would hope, everywhere around the country? So I know that it's an application-based process, but I think it will be an interesting one to look at, and who gets the funding in that as well.
That's very useful, Bernie. Thank you. Conor, do you have any final comments?
Just one quickie there. I was just doing a little calculation there of the attendance tonight. We'll say 37 or 39, whatever it was, of 453. So that's 12% of all the registered members. So I'd be suggesting that somebody somewhere, including myself, I suppose, should be thinking about how can we, you know, encourage more participation. I mean, in our little group, we were struggling to get 4 or 5 in our little breakout group there. So it's a bit, you know, we're just clinging on by the fingernails. So I'd love to see more active participation and looking at ways of encouraging it.
Thank you, Conor. Jerry?
I was just going to suggest that if because of the COVID situation, there might be some spare funds, that perhaps if it's not too expensive, maybe some research should be commissioned into how the PPN is viewed. In fact, even if the PPN is known about, that in other words, there are a lot of organizations that are not part of it or that don't participate, let's say, fully in it. And if you could get some answers to that kind of question, it might be very useful. But as to whether that's affordable or not, I do not know.
We can take that back to the Secretariat, perhaps, and look at whether any existing budget can be used for that sort of almost marketing research. Liam?
Maybe Jose.
Yeah, just following up there on the previous 2 comments. I would think what back in October we had a much higher percentage at the plenary, and I would presume that probably a winter's night it's easier to get people to engage in something like this than it is on a fine summer's evening or early summer's evening like we had this evening. The other thing is the well-being thing that we have to do that work on. That would be all around that whole thing about finding out what the ordinary members of the PPN, what they know about us and all of that kind of thing. So that's all actually in hand. It is something that we're working on, and we're doing that. That's the Secretariat is rolling that out September, I think, is it, Sandy?
That's right.
Yeah.
Liam, Bernie, did you have some?
Yes, I was going to say that we could save some of the research money, Jerry, because we have a good sense of how the council and the elected representatives view the PPN, because we didn't hear any complaints, or I didn't anyway, in a 2.5-year gap of we really miss the representation from the PPN. So I think we have to make ourselves relevant, and we have to push that we are part of the democratic structure, and that is, you know, enshrined, there's legality around it, and we have to get those people to actually take us seriously and really take us into account. So I think that's our role, really, because we kind of have a good feeling. It's a tick box exercise if you want to get grants, if you want to get funding, but actually outside of that, it's disrespectful in the way that we're given agendas, in the time that's allocated, and the amount of documentation that we have to read within a week. So I think we have to push back on those issues to make ourselves relevant.
That's great, Bernie. Thank you.
Here,
Sorry,
here.
through the chair, through the chair, could I come in on that? I think the question of being relevant is very appropriate. We have to be proactive. We can't be putting things on the long finger. We have to address the issues as they come up. And certainly, I know from the arts policy group, there are issues that are relevant right now. And we can't be waiting on until next October or whatever. The research around that needs to be done now. And if the PPN hasn't been involved in 2.5 years at county council level, well, I can understand the gap and I can understand where we're at. And we get the respect we deserve. We need to be proactive in this field.
Absolutely right, Michael. That's great. Thank you. And I do think that we do have to engage with the themes, with the key themes that actually make us relevant. It's not so much them just listening to us, it's what we're actually saying. And what we're actually saying needs to be focused on the issues, the real key issues that concern the communities in every one of the areas that we're dealing with. Right, so we're getting on to the time when the meeting should close. We were supposed to be having a time for free interventions. I don't know if members feel that we've already had that, or do you want to continue? We have had a good exchange there. So maybe we could leave it at that, I suggest.
Oh, I'd like to just add the comment that I think we need to persuade, whether it's the councillors or the actual council, to be more, I was going to say, aware of what's going on in communities. I mean, in our particular community in Ishannon, just for one example, although I'm sure we can find many others, we've had this huge volume of traffic going through the village, no planning about it at all. They're spending millions on a new road going past Macroom down to West Cork. They don't have the volume of traffic we have here. The pollution from the cars in our main street is just incredible. We can't get hold of the figures. We know councillors, they look for anything which might give them a vote, etc. I don't want to be too cynical, but I think the council needs to be more, as I say, aware of what's going on and down to earth. We had situations recently where the council produced an information situation on a town in our municipal district. I think it was 63 pages, and yet elected members of the municipal district, the PPN members, weren't even sent a copy. It's actually disgraceful. I think we're looked down on as sort of second-class citizens. And I had a situation where one of the SPCs didn't even record the PPN members who were there. And when I queried it, oh, we normally only record the councillors. And I mean, these are people who are giving their time voluntary, and they should have regard and respect, and they're not getting it. So I think the whole attitude from the top down of the council needs to change.
Okay, that's great, Gavin. Thank you for that point. As I say, the new PPN is only starting now. We're starting to engage. We'll engage more as time goes by, get more familiar with the issues, and be able to become more relevant and raise the issues that our communities need raised. I'd like to thank you all for attending tonight. Thanks for the effort. And I'm sure that we've only one way to go, and that's upward.
One second.
So good night to everybody, and thanks for attending.
Thanks, Jose.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jose.